What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the second episode of the F.R.E.E Podcast, Finance, Real Estate, Entrepreneurship. I'm your co-host, Sam.
And I'm your co-host, Andrew.
And basically, before we start this, there is a fee for this podcast. And you don't have to pay anything. All we ask is that you refer us to someone, whether it's, a YouTube subscription or you write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. That's all we ask is you refer us to a friend. And that's kind of the fee of this show. We're taking after some of the best podcasts out there, kind of taking their ideas, but that's okay. And kind of the topic of conversation today is college worth it, right? We're going to run through the expenses, the costs, and kind of the pros and cons, right?
Right, exactly. And that's something that's it's a lot bigger of a question than it may seem like, and it could be different for everybody, and we'll go over a lot of those scenarios and sort of break down our experiences and sort of maybe you'd say college is worth it for you, and I would probably say the same for me, and why it was for us and what our takeaways have been, and just advice in general to younger generations.
Yeah, right. So came across a statistic actually that college costs have outpaced wages by over 8 times. So I'm sorry, Grandma, but me flipping burgers, it's not gonna put me through college anymore, is it? I mean, it's
No.
ridiculous some of these costs. We both went to college together, and we're both finishing up right now. What is the dumbest expense you think you've had to pay for right now?
Oh gosh, I mean, just some of the books that we have to pay for. So this is my last semester as well as yours, and this one hasn't been all that bad. But I would say sometime in my junior year, I spent $2,500 in one semester on online books that I never opened, not once.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, I would have to say access codes. That's where
Yeah,
they get you. You have to pay tuition to be in a class, and then they make you pay an extra $250 or something so you can complete the class and do the assignments. And it's just completely backwards because they nitpick every single thing in the class. Oh, man.
exactly. And with those access codes, you can they're only valid for one use. So they've kind of gotten around the aftermarket used textbook sales industry that even people just a couple years above us, they were able to use for their whole college careers. So
Right. I
we
mean, you
really
don't
got it.
even get to keep the book. I mean,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
big benefit of buying your books or something, if it's like an important class, like a higher 300, 400 classes, you at least get to keep the book. But with the access code, you're paying the price of a book, but you only get to keep it for 10 to 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. It's like every bigger YouTuber has their courses. It's sort of like each professor has their own course that you have to buy online, and then it expires eventually. So that's just a really crazy expense.
Exactly. They just push it so hard on you. So basically, I think for both of us, I'll speak for myself, but as far as college being worth it, I think for me it definitely was worth it. I mean, I'm going to be graduating with two majors in accountancy and finance. I mean, those are obviously really, in demand. I think they're very useful as well in personal life. So as far as for me, I think those degrees were worth it. And besides the monetary value, I mean, the connections I've made. I mean, you're living proof right here. This podcast. You're kind of the living proof of the connections that I've made. But it goes way further than that, than just a monetary return on investment. I don't know what you think about your two
Yeah.
majors. I mean, you have the same major as me, but what do you think?
Yeah, so my major is finance and a minor in entrepreneurship, and so uh, two of those things were a little juxtaposed, I guess, that I thought in the beginning. So, um, going into finance, I wanted to go into investment banking. That was my goal from the beginning, and then entrepreneurship was just sort of like my passion project, like just studying something that I was really interested in and that I had been involved in many times before. Was that was just on the side, but it turned out to be probably the more useful for me out of the two things. And that reasoning is because I ended up going into real estate instead of going into finance. I got into investment banking and a little bit of accountancy, and it just wasn't for me. It wasn't something that I was passionate about, and I figured if I only have this one time, this one career, I might as well go for something that I actually enjoy. And so I went into real estate, which does not require a degree. It requires a school to go to though, but it's only 10 to 12 weeks, and that was less valuable than college. But for me, it was valuable, but not in the monetary sense that it got me a job.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. And it kind of brings us into our next talking point is the alternatives. I mean,
Right.
obviously, so what is kind of the total expense that you think you paid for college versus the total expense that you paid for a simple, a real estate agent license?
Right. So, all together, sort of getting licensed in real estate and joining a brokerage and everything should cost you about it should cost you less than $1,000. So that comes with a lot of drawbacks, and the reasoning for that is that it's so unstable, and you don't get a lot of the benefits that you would at a regular company in a different industry. But I was a really fortunate case in college where I went to one of the programs that we have in our state of Kentucky, and I got to go to college for free. So that was really fortunate for me.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, going into scholarships, I mean, that's the only reason, I
Right.
was basically able to afford college, to be honest. I mean, it was really tough my freshman and sophomore year. I was having to basically just give up all fun just to put myself through college. I mean,
Right.
during the summers, I worked, an 8 to 4 p.m. job. And then afterwards, I had to go mow some lawns and basically do some yard work to make some extra cash on top of that just to put me through another 2 semesters of college. Then when I was at the university, I had to work a job as, a weightlifting, staff room member or whatever. And I had to work, as an intramural basketball referee. I mean, it was these things that it seemed normal at the time to kind of put me through this, but looking back, it's like it should not take this much to get an education,
And
it's ridiculous.
I think that what you just said, sort of that it seemed normal at the time, is sort of a testament to how far it's gone because it is normal, but it just should not be normal at all.
Oh,
But it just gotten to
absolutely.
that point.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been so normalized that college should cost an arm and a leg, but in the end, we actually have to think, should it cost this much? Like
Right.
I just want an education so I can, at least support myself, right? And for those people who don't want to go into trades, who, aren't really good with their hands, don't really want to do electrician, and their passion is elsewhere that requires a college degree, for those people, it really shouldn't cause them to go into crippling debt for the next 2 to 3 decades.
Right. And most of that, the reason that they would go into that debt is just pressure from people that do want to go to college, and that's one of the most unfortunate things is that I was just looking that it's estimated about 27% of people even work in a field that has the same qualifications as their degree. And so that's really unfortunate for people to go in basically a apartment's worth of debt just to please some people that they'll probably forget about in a couple of years. And
Right,
also
and that's
something
yeah. Go
something
ahead.
that's worth noting, it's worth noting that we also went to a relatively inexpensive school that was in state, and so that was less than half of what it could have been if we went to a fancier school out of state.
Oh, absolutely. So, kind of the expenses here. I forget what it was freshman year, but for junior and senior year, our tuition was what around like 11 grand, 12 grand,
Right,
something like that. I mean,
right.
that's cheap. That's
Yeah.
like that's very
I,
cheap compared to some of the alternatives.
I looked at and I visited, and I was accepted to a couple other schools, and some of them that I consider were like UVA, so University of Virginia. For me, being out of state, that was going to cost me, about $64,000 a year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we're not even talking about, housing costs,
no,
food, transportation, parking passes, books, access codes, everything that accompanies that. We're strictly talking tuition here.
right. And that's if I lived as a robot and didn't have any sort of entertainment or didn't go
Right.
anywhere or anything. So that is an extreme amount of money.
Right. And the societal pressures is another huge one, right? I think the reason that, you're seeing a lot of people go into the student debt is whether it's pressure from family, from friends, from schools, even your high school pressuring you that is the only route that you can take. I mean, I think these people don't know what they're signing. I mean, they are
Yeah.
signing away a huge chunk of your cash flow for the next 10 to 20 years, and that will cripple you. And so I think it really begs, the question, where are some alternatives? And we kind of talked about it. You talked about one, real estate agent, less cost, but, there's also a risk there with more challenges and less stability. But, we can talk about trades, electricians, plumbers, linemen. I mean, there are other options out there is kind of the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, absolutely. And in all of those positions, they lead to positions where you can move up. So you can become a manager. So say like a line worker, can become a line manager. Somebody can become a department manager, and all of those end up paying decent amounts. It's just about going through the beginning, which is tough.
Right, right. I mean, I've heard stories of, these people making six figures, within 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's huge. That is
Huge.
huge, especially if you're looking for a more monetary, return instead of, kind of the typical college, lifestyle and stuff. If you're looking for that strict monetary return, you're good with your hands and, you're not half bad at it, definitely take a look at those trades because
Right.
that's kind of where it's at. But
Right, exactly.
I saw something at Google too. Google's offering certificates as well. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really curious to see where that heads, because I think that's the threat to college right there. That is the threat to universities is these companies are in essence they're offering basically certificates, whether it's data analytics, whether it's, some type of analyst position, some type of, whatever it is basically. It's a certificate that you get within 3 to 6 months and then you are earning 50K right out of the gate at one of these several companies, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Apple, whether it's Google. I mean, these are some high up companies that have good benefits, good stuff like that, and you're not having to take out the 50, 60, 70 grand in loans.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of what those certificates are doing is replacing several years of starting on a job. And so they know that they can fast track you in and you can start delivering value faster. And so with those companies, especially with their workforce being so similar, almost similar generations, people that are interested in the same things. I'm talking about the big tech companies, Facebook, Google, even Uber and things like that. So what's really interesting is it's replacing those starting years, and you can almost skip past 3 to 5 years of work just in 6 months. And I think that, yeah, that is one of the biggest threats to education as we know it, because those certificates aren't all that expensive.
Right, right. And obviously, there are career paths and majors that, you can't really dance around the bush. If you want to become a neurosurgeon, you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, you kind of have to put in the time. You got to go through that educational step.
Even a CPA.
CPA too, accountants, you
Right.
need that 4 year degree. And then even after that, you need the 150 credit hours and then you need to take the exam. So we're not saying college isn't needed for, some degrees or something. And we're not saying that, even if you don't have a degree that isn't, a monetary ROI, that it's useless. I mean, there's so much more. I mean, the baseline of a college degree is knowledge. So if you're willing to pay that and you know the opportunity cost, do it because it's knowledge right there. But we are saying do it smartly, right? Do it with a little bit of, thought behind it and make sure you're not, making the wrong decision and crippling yourself. But it really does have to kind of start on, a systemic level of how high do these college costs have to get before it's like it just can't work anymore.
Yeah, before nobody can go and before the student loan market outweighs mortgage markets. At that point, that says something because that means that people have more money in debt than they do in buying their house. So
Exactly. I mean, you're thinking about, these students, graduates or whatever, if they're coming out with 40, 50, 60 grand in debt, just from student loans. We're not even talking about credit cards yet, but how much does that affect their consumer spending? How much does it affect, them buying a house? What will that do to the other markets just by simply these college costs being outrageously high?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it does put a big hindrance on sort of consumer spending in the younger generations, even though the younger generations do shop a lot online and they do fall into those bad habits, maybe of just putting in a credit card and going. I think that if people had the college costs of, say, what our parents had, that would bump that consumer spending and really ultimately create more jobs in that way, which would be a really great economic boost. And also maybe less state funding would have to go to universities. So
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of different avenues, you can talk about free college, you can talk about some paid off college, you can talk about,
right.
not changing anything at all, but like I think something definitely has to change here. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
it's outrageously high,
At this
and it
pace,
all.
it'll be a couple $1 million to go to college in 20
Yeah,
years.
yeah, seriously, just 8 times faster right now, and it's 60 grand just to pay your tuition. Imagine what it would be
Right.
for your kids. I
Yeah.
mean, you won't even be able to afford that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
no
not
way.
even
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. It isn't sustainable at all. And I think that when our generation grows up, um, and we're eventually sending our kids to school, then I think that will be the time for some sort of change to take place, just because we will have been victims of the student loan debt. And if something doesn't happen about that, then some sort of correction will have to happen in the education market.
Oh, absolutely. So, to kind of wrap up this episode, the biggest thing that we're trying to get across is that a college degree may not be for everyone. And that's kind of the biggest thing. And the main point here is don't attack the people getting a college degree, attack the root of the problem, attack the costs. Why are the costs rising so high that these people have to take this stuff out to get to where they want to go, and they have to cripple themselves just for a decent education?
Yeah, exactly. And I completely agree. You have to question where it's coming from. So, and maybe seeing a more detailed cost breakdown would ease people, but I think it's just too high now.
Right, right. So, with that, I think we're going to conclude this second episode. For the third episode, we'll have something special for you all. If you haven't
Absolutely.
already, like, subscribe, leave a review of what you thought, and kind of, was college worth it for you? So, with
Yeah.
that, sign off. Until next time.
Until next time, we'll see you all.